credit rating regarding our taxable water and sewer bonds, and with me is Amy Gillis, Chief Financial Director of Financial Services, and she's going to give you a brief presentation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for allowing us to do this today. It's going to save the taxpayers quite a bit of money. So, and it was urgent to get on today. As you know, we're refunding a water and sewer bond. It's about a $70 million bond. Significant, interest rates are climbing just slightly. And so we felt like it was imperative to get to the market as soon as possible. The order of today is to change our rate covenant. It became apparent that our rate coverage, which was 1.2, if we raised it to 1.35, that Moody's would be more favorable for a higher rating. And so we wanted to get on the agenda for today. I appreciate that. So this resolution changes our rate coverage requirement from what it was of 1.2 to 1.35%.
What I'd be looking for is a motion and a second from our board members here to move forward with that resolution. Mr. Chairman, motion to approve. We have a motion from Commissioner Holcomb, a second from Commissioner Narvaru. All in favor of the resolution? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. 3-0. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, clerk of the court. We're going to move now to item D. Boy, that's really sensitive. Item D, BOCC presentations. We're going to bring Scott Herring, our DPW director, to the microphone. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, school board members, city council members. For the record, my name is Scott Herring, Hernando County Public Works Director and County Engineer, and I'm here to talk about sidewalks and school zone. Let's see if I can make this work.
Before you get going, what I would request for the flow of the meeting is wait till the presenter finishes his presentation, and then I'll look for hands for anybody who would like to speak from the school board, the Board of County Commissioners, or the city. Okay, this way we can have a good flow because we do have a lot to present today. Thank you.
Thank you. This is an update on sidewalks and school zones as they are within Hernando County. Okay. The first part of it is a sidewalk update. Sidewalks that we are constructing these days are done under the local agency program, which is funded through the Federal Highway Administration and administered by the Florida Department of Transportation. Hernando County has been fully lap certified since 1997. Our current certification expires in 2022, and we will be going through a recertification for another 3 years. We have installed more than 32 miles of sidewalk using this program. Since 2010, the local agency program funding has covered $11 million towards sidewalk installation. The county has contributed $1.3 million. Project selection. Projects are prioritized by the Hernando/Citrus Metropolitan Planning Organization. This also involves the work of Technical Advisory, Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and Citizen Advisory Committee. Final recommendations are done by the Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board comprised of elected officials. This is an overview of recent completed projects. I'm not going to go through all of them in due to the amount of time we have. This is the Spring Hill area. This is the second part of the Spring Hill area. Brooksville area sidewalks. Current funded projects. See there, we have quite a few in the hopper that will be coming to construction relatively quickly here. School zone updates. We're looking at all the school zones because they have to be updated. School zones are regulated by Florida statute, Florida Administrative Code, and Chapter 15 of the Florida Department of Transportation Speed Zone Manual. New school zone regulations were promulgated by the Florida Department of Transportation in 2017 and updated in 2018. All school zone signage and speed limits are being in compliance by July 1st, 2023. All school zone markings can be updated with the next resurfacing. We're actually doing everything as part of 2 separate projects. This is the speed zone manual, which gives us the criteria for when we're installing school zones, how we install them, the distances we use for the flashing beacons and everything else. That's one of the primary focuses of this, is instead of static signs saying you have a school zone from 7 to 7:45 and 2 to 2:45, the legislature and the Florida Department of Transportation has basically told us we have to put in flashing beacons for all of them. These are the regulations as contained out of the manual. These are the requirements we're following for all of these revised installations. These are just some examples of what we're doing. You see Powell Middle School, Explorer K through 8, J.D. Floyd Elementary, Hernando High, Challenger K through 8, Moton Elementary, Eastside Elementary, F.W. Springstead High, and that's it. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'd be more than happy to make this presentation available to all the groups in the room. And with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Scott. Let's start with Ms. Prescott of the school board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very quick presentation. I just wondering if I was available.
Yes, I'll make it, but I'll send it to the superintendent and to the city manager of Brooksville, and they can disseminate it from there.
For the sheriff, but and I know in Milford County, had 5 people touch the top and friends, and they never said, for no reason, they I want to know that it was so bad.
We are constantly educating through both public service announcements, our social media platforms, and sometimes having a what we call a word of prayer on the side of the road with somebody who's violating the law by way of a traffic stop. And just traffic stops alone, not necessarily in school zones, but traffic stops we do between 30 and 40,000 a year. So we do a tremendous number of traffic stops, and a lot of that is directed at school zones and try to educate people. It is a difficult thing because, you know, with school zones, volume, sometimes state volume for violations. They get frustrated with the volume of traffic, and they equate that with a violation. Maybe one person commits a violation, and that's where all their anger goes. So, but we've been very fortunate. We have plenty of school crossing guards and traffic control officers, and I think they do an exceptional job, despite what the weather is in those areas where there's a high volume of walkers and so forth. And they do let us know. They do work for us. I do have my Lieutenant Lamia, who's here to represent. He can answer any specific questions, maybe about any specific areas, but the traffic control officers and school crossing guards do give us information if we're having a particular area where there is an issue, and we will enhance enforcement. So.
I wanted to say, issue 35 points with no ticket, but the word is spread. So thank you.
I think next is going to be School Board Member Jimmy Lodato. I think those might be a little directional, so make sure it's pointing towards your mouth as you speak. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible on the street that you could do how long
Mr. Lodato? Mr. Lodato, I'm afraid that mic's not working. Can you take this microphone and pass it down? I know that's laid plans, right? Mice and men here. Press that button in, and then we'll just pass that down the way, and we'll figure this out.
Okay, well, Scott, so what I've asked is a few questions. One is, could the crosswalk be painted in yellow when we repaint them? Because it's white everywhere. And I'd like to have some kind of distinction when we get to the school zone, and we also have 23 schools. So I don't think that would be a drastic situation, but I don't know what the rules and regulations are. And secondly is, when we have this speed zone, I noticed that when I go along Challenger, people are just running through there very quickly and not abiding by the school zone because it's a double, divided type of highway. But is there any way we can kind of enforce that a little stronger, maybe with signs, these big brand new yellow signs that are almost like almost an orangey look?
We're following the guidelines at this point in time. I don't believe they call for yellow pavement markings for that. This all flows down from what's called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And as far as the in-ground flashers, we're not presently pursuing those at this point in time.
Okay, is it a cost factor that's causing this, or is it
It's a cost and a maintenance factor. And one point I did forget to make is we have been coordinating with the School Board Facilities Office on this. They have been set the plans several times for them to look at, so they will know what's going on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Herring? Mr. Collar, your microphone.
The guidelines, if those are set by the state.
Yes, the guidelines were set by the state, the Florida Administrative Code, and incorporated into the speed zone manual that the Florida Department of Transportation publishes.
Mr. Herring, I appreciate that. Again, important things that you had stated, 32 miles of sidewalks have been completed, and we'll be looking to see some upgrades of the school crosswalks. Thank you very much. There's no other questions or comments. We do have one from City Council.
David Bailey, City Council. I didn't see Methodist School Center on that. Is that not one of the schools that would be allowed to have that signal?
At this point in time, we're only focusing on the public schools. We're not focusing on private and charter schools. That's an interesting situation of who is responsible for paying for that and who's also responsible for maintaining that. Those issues, and I'm not aware that those have been ironed out at this point in time.
Okay.
And once again, we provided a list of all the school zones in here, which I will make available, but I didn't do graphics of all.
Mr. Herring, I do have one other question. Hernando County is LAP certified.
Yes, sir.
The city, I don't believe, are they not able to be? So is there an overlap of the LAP certification that assists with the city, or that not able?
It's my understanding the city could choose to get LAP certified if they so desired. However, they can also work under our LAP certification. We actually have a three-party interlocal agreement between the Board of County Commissioners, the City of Brooksville, and the Metropolitan Planning Organization that would deal with these types of projects and how they would move forward.
Clarifying that, it's important when we're talking about these sidewalks to schools. Thank you very much. It does not look like we have any other hands up, so thank you, Mr. Herring. We'll move on to item D2, and that will be presented by Michelle Miller. This is a review of the land use coordination process. Thank you, Michelle.
Good morning, everybody. Michelle Miller, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this morning. My focus today is going to be to discuss the land use coordination process, which is primarily the review of land uses throughout the review process and our coordination efforts with the Hernando County School District's Facility Construction Department. So there are 3 phases of the land use process that we coordinate with the school district on. The first is the comprehensive plan amendments. The second is then the rezoning and a master plan revision. And then the third is the subdivision approval. And I'll be reviewing each one of these individually and discussing how the county and the school district coordinate on school capacity issues and development trends as a result. So the first is a comprehensive plan amendment, and this only occurs if the future land use is not in place. And the future land use is dictated by our future land use map, which is associated with our comprehensive plan that is required to be approved by the state. And what that does is that sets our future growth patterns for the county. It lets the state and our residents know what we anticipate to occur in the county for the future. And what we do in this is that when there's large projects that come in place, for example, say like the Spring Center project that was occurring in Spring Hill, what we do is we review those to determine what those impacts may be of those large projects, especially to the school district. And we take a look and determine what improvements the developer may be responsible for. The school capacity is not committed at this point, but what it does is it puts the developer on notice. And then also, if necessary, we can develop specific strategies to identify the improvements that the developer may be responsible for and what agreements may be necessary. So if there needs to be a development agreement with the school district to potentially provide for capacity improvements, or maybe, again, going back to the example of the Spring Center, there were some negotiations for this traffic stacking heading into Explorer, those kinds of things. Those can be identified even as early on as the comprehensive plan phase to put the developer on notice of what they may be responsible for as they begin construction. The second phase is the rezoning and or a master plan revision. And the master plan is if somebody comes in and does a plan development project, they actually have to submit a specific plan that identifies how the project is laid out, how many units, et cetera. And with this, there's multiple ways that the school district has been involved with us. We've had the pleasure of having Jim Lipsey as our ex officio participants in the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. That allows him to answer questions from the public or from the Planning and Zoning Commission members on school capacity issues or concerns related to specific projects. In addition, the school district is also a reviewing entity for those projects. And what they do is they take a look at the total number of units that's being proposed by a project, and they associate those with the student generation. They let us know as the county if there is the potential for any capacity concerns. It does not bind the capacity at this particular time, but it lets the developer know, again, if there's going to be a particular concern related to capacity when they move forward to construction. So lastly, this is the most critical piece when it comes to actually capacity determination, and that is our conditional plat and site plan approval. At this particular stage, when they submit the conditional plat application to the county, they submit a school district concurrency application. And at that particular time, that's when capacity is either committed, or if capacity is not available, then a proportionate share agreement is then negotiated with the developer. And what that does is that then reserves the capacity with the school district, and that capacity is reserved for 1 year after that conditional plat is approved. If the plat does not move forward, if no construction plans or final plat is then submitted for approval within that time period, essentially then that capacity falls off and becomes available for the next project. And they would then have to submit an additional school district concurrency application afterwards. I don't talk as fast as Mr. Harrington is speaking of myself. I apologize. I wasn't nervous till I got up. We've had the pleasure of having a continuous coordination process with the school district facilities department. Some of the things that we've done to provide this continuous coordination is that we have routine meetings and updates with our staff. Right now we're meeting weekly via Zoom, and that gives us a chance to discuss development approvals, discuss potential school capacity issues. We're actually in the process now of going through and completely vetting the capacity analysis the school district has, making sure that everything that they have in their data is still accurate, if there's any updates that we need to make based on development approvals, et cetera. So this weekly connection has really been good for us to essentially be on the same page with what's happening with the development pipeline and any concerns related to school capacity. In addition, myself, I'm the planning staff member who is part of the School District Planning and Growth Management Committee, and that's given us a chance again to see what's in the pipeline for capacity improvements, what's happening on the school district side. This allows us then to communicate to our development partners if there could be potential concerns with capacity, what's happening on the school district side, things that they are looking at trying to do. It just, again, allows us to have that continuous information flow between our agencies. And then last but not least, the 5-year work program is required to be approved annually. It's actually submitted to the county prior to submission to the school district. There we go. So with this gives us a chance to then review that pipeline again, allow us to see what is being presented for capacity improvements, if there's any potential redistricting that could be occurring, et cetera. And this also allows us to see what the permanent capacity is for the schools. Again, so we can communicate with our development partners. You know, they ask us a lot of those questions for due diligence, and it just gives us the most current information available. With that, ask if there's any questions.
Michelle, I do have one. You briefly glossed over something I have not heard for several years, and that's Spring Hill Town Center.
Oh, yes, sir.
I was under the impression maybe that wasn't moving forward at all. Is there something to that, or we just mention that?
Oh, I mentioned it primarily as an example because of the significant amount of school district involvement that was with that project. We have had some very limited interest from some developers looking at possibly revisiting that, but nothing has been submitted at this point.
Yeah, that's good. Because fortunately, if it moved forward, obviously our board had approved something with a town center design that was supposed to relieve some of the capacity issues and things like that. So I would obviously be a little concerned about what we're talking about, where's houses. Do we have okay, school board member Prescott? You're recognized. Microphone to your left.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, both the county and the school board hire consultants like Tyndall Oliver to make predictions in terms of growth. At what point in the process do you look at those numbers, or do you?
Yes, so we have been very involved with the school district when it comes to any of their impact fee studies, capacity analysis, et cetera. We work together very closely on reviewing the methodology that's being presented by the consultants. Both Mr. Piazza and I were very involved when the last update came through from the school district on the impact fee study, and also on I believe there was another study related to facilities and future growth for the district, what the needs were. So anything that comes through that, we are heavily involved in both the methodology and then also recruiters.
So is the county planning to do any more consulting or studies at this point?
When it comes
that
to
you're aware of?
When it comes to the school district, that's generated primarily by the school district.
No, I mean the county itself.
In relation to
planning and growth.
The 2040 plan was approved 2 years ago, and that really was the last review that we did in terms of land use growth trends, et cetera. We do go through every year and review some of the statistical information that's available from Weaver and from other things, and try to produce what we call a statistical abstract that provides some basic information about the county. But that's really all I'm aware of at this point.
Because 2040 is a long way away. And that was before COVID, too. So, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Do we have anybody? School board member Lodato, you recognized.
Thank you for your presentation. Brief but very factual. And I was happy to see that what we're discussing here is in a developer comes to see you, and it goes before planning and zoning, and then it comes in before county commission. Okay. Question is, when the project is approved at the county level, is that before or after they have the plan from the schools as to what our capacities would be in that particular area?
So the when it comes to the actual project itself, so when the subdivision is approved, which is what's going to set the stage for how many units, the particulars for utilities, et cetera. Actually, Jim and I have a check and balance where I do not issue what's called a certificate of concurrency, which essentially says that public facilities are available. I do not issue that until I know the school district has reviewed and issued theirs. And the certificate of concurrency is a requirement for the approval of the conditional plat. So they do not receive approval for that subdivision for the conditional plat until all of those requirements are met.
Okay, would it be a good reason for for Jim to attend the meetings or when it's the planning and zoning to see what's upcoming, or how do you think that's best handled?
He actually does. Being the ex officio member, he is involved in every planning and zoning.
Okay, right. And then on this 1 year cap for a developer, when you have this 1 year cap and they don't go on with it, then it opens it up for the next project that comes in.
Yes.
And then we have to go through the same approval at that time to see if we have the capacity. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate your input. That is going to conclude the BOCC presentations. We're now going to go to item E, which is the Hernando County School District. And I believe John Stratton, the superintendent, is going to be presenting. Is that accurate?
Yes, thank you. Yes, our first item is the overview of school permanent capacity. Mr. Jim Lipsey, who heard his name mentioned several times, with your planning and growth department, is the lead in our planning and growth department. Lipsey.
Good morning, Mr. Lipsey.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
You could do me a huge favor. There's a little height discrepancy. Can you turn that microphone up towards you? Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Bear with me on these controls. Let's try that. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jim Lipsey, Manager of Planning, Design, and Construction with the school district. We're going to talk first briefly about permanent school capacity. The Florida Department of Education has a Florida Inventory of School Houses, FISH, the FISH database that tracks both relocatable and permanent student capacity for all schools in the state of Florida. However, we are conducting reviews for concurrency at the local level. We're really only considering permanent classroom space. And this makes sense because really portables were never intended to be a long-term solution for growth planning. For public school concurrency, the level of service is generally defined as 100% of the permanent capacity. Now, in this chart here before you, the level of service appears as the last two columns on the right as a percentage of capacity being utilized. Now, to calculate that percentage, we start with the permanent capacity, deduct the number of students enrolled, there in the middle columns, and then we also deduct capacity that is reserved for residential development that's already been approved. This gives us the available capacity, which we then calculate as a percentage of permanent capacity used. You'll notice that there are two columns each for enrollment and for utilized capacity. Why is this comparison important? Well, there's no doubt that this school year has been a very odd year for everyone. Hernando County, like many school districts throughout the state and the nation, saw a decrease in enrollment during the pandemic. For planning purposes, however, we fully expect enrollment will return to the pre-pandemic level pretty quickly once this is over. And as you can see, we're utilizing less than 100% of our permanent capacity at the middle and high school levels. But as the top row indicates, our elementary schools clearly exceed 100%. We are able to accommodate those students, but that's only because the temporary relocatable capacity currently in our inventory. That really is just a brief overview of permanent school capacity by grade level. If you're interested in a school-by-school breakdown, a more detailed report is available to be sent to you after the meeting. That concludes this portion. Any questions?
I have a question for you.
Please.
Two of them actually. One, you said the expectation is for you to go back to pre-pandemic numbers. So there's no expectation that more people will utilize like Florida virtual or choose to do more of a homeschool type scenario. And then the second question was as far as your elementary school capacity issues. Is there any reason that with high schools not being at full capacity and elementary being above, that there could be a shift in maybe 8th grade through 12th grade be seen at the high schools and K through 5 or 4, whatever your numbers are at a particular school, be the age group or the grade level for the elementary school so you can adjust capacity?
To your first question about returning to pre-pandemic levels for enrollment, I don't know that anyone has the crystal ball that's quite that clear to be able to know for sure exactly what enrollment is going to do. Students were there prior to the pandemic. Yes, there's been a shift to online learning, has been successful for some students, fairly unsuccessful for others. I don't think any district has the capability to know exactly where that's going to fall. But when this year is viewed as an anomaly, the general trend has been a continuing increase. So the second point about adapting other spaces, the learning environments are very specific for age groups and curriculum. So to shift classrooms in that regard would be extremely challenging. I don't know if our curriculum folks may be able to address that later this morning in their presentation, but from a facilities perspective, that would be extremely challenging.
Okay. The reason why, things changed. When I was going to school, it wasn't all that long ago. There wasn't middle schools. There was elementary schools, and then there were junior highs, and there were high schools. And we had 7 through 12 all in the same building in most school districts where I came from. You just had one wing of the school maybe was for the 7th and 8th, and then the 9th and 12th for another, but they were all together in one facility to manage that. So it was junior, senior high school and elementary school. So that's why I brought that up, because we've seen a shift in the middle school model and the K-8 model. And when we're talking about capacity, we just always challenge people to think outside the box sometimes.
Sure. And we'll see some ideas in our next presentation that will indicate that outside the box thinking is actually happening too.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Holcomb has a question.
Could you go back to the last slide?
Sure.
So non-anomaly time frame. What's your trigger when you either need to add a portable or build an additional building? Is there a number at 120%, 125% where you're to look at increasing capacity?
Generally, for concurrency purposes, that number is 100%. For construction, it generally is going to be probably around 115, 120%.
So what's your first trigger? Is once you get to that, make that decision, are you looking at portables? Does it depend on the campus? You're looking at an additional stationary building? How does that usually take effect?
All of those factors really come into play, and with the next presentation that we have coming up showing planned additions, I think you'll get a little insight into that further.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Our Administrator Jeff Rogers has a question.
When does it become the reserve capacity is against for approved residential development? At one point in that presentation Michelle gave, you allocate those student stations, like when the board approves that development, is that when you add that, house them, the student stations on there? Or?
When conditional plat is approved, and that's the process that Michelle spoke to. So the school board does the review and reserves the capacity at that time.
Okay, so when you give you and Michelle agree upon that conditional, that concurrency for the school station, when it comes back on the conditional plan. So currently we have a lot of residential developments that's been approved in the county. I'm sure you know all of them because you right there in the middle of all of it. That's and I guess we're waiting for that concurrency to happen on those developments as they come through for site planning. You review those, and then that's when that number will go up in that 3 as those other ones get approved.
Yes.
Okay, and that Jason will probably show how you're going to solve it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for this item? Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move then to item E2, planned school additions for growth.
2 years ago, the school district formed a planning and growth management committee, which still functions today. The committee's primary purpose really is twofold. First, to explore a variety of options to increase permanent classroom space within the district, especially at our elementary schools. But secondly, also to find a way to keep neighborhood traffic from getting worse as schools grow, or better yet, to reduce the amount of cars overflowing onto neighborhood streets. The majority of residential development is comprised of, the general trend is comprised of infill projects scattered throughout the community. So the Planning and Growth Committee felt the district needed a similar approach to start increasing capacity throughout the school district. While new schools certainly will be needed in the future, a more prudent and less costly approach for the near term is perhaps to add classroom wings at existing schools. So the committee recommended that we create a conceptual master plan for each elementary school. Each master plan would depict the ultimate build out for each school, what each school is capable of supporting, while simultaneously limiting or reducing its impact to neighborhood traffic. So we're happy to showcase for you the first 4 of these elementary school master plans. First on our screen is Brooksville Elementary School. Now the goals of all these really are common: to eliminate relocatable capacity. You see the existing conditions on the left. The buildings highlighted in yellow are those that are relocatable capacity. The second goal is to maximize permanent capacity. The drawing on the right, the proposed condition shows the classroom addition highlighted in orange. 16 classrooms would provide 352 additional permanent student stations. But then there's also an option for this plan as well to maximize on-site vehicle queuing on a double-stack lane, which would increase from the current condition allowing 66 vehicles to a proposed condition which would allow 158 cars. Our next school, J.D. Floyd Elementary, same goals, increasing student capacity, permanent student capacity. The buildings highlighted in yellow on the left, again, are those that are relocatable capacity. On the right, there is proposed in yellow on this drawing, a classroom addition, also 16 classrooms that would increase permanent capacity, 352 students. The car line length, again, a double stacked lane approach would allow an increase from 32 cars presently in the queuing lane on site to 133 cars. This particular property, the western third of it, would be undeveloped. There's a concept for what could be a future use, but that's there's no commitment to do that at this particular point. Our third example, Spring Hill Elementary School. Again, on the left, highlighted in orange here, are all of the spaces that are relocatable capacity. On the right, toward the lower right corner of the site is a new 20 classroom addition shown at this property, increasing student stations by 430. Again, this eliminates the relocatable capacity and maximizes the permanent capacity. Car line length on this will be increased significantly as well, allowing from 26 cars to 180 vehicles. The cost on, I haven't mentioned the cost on these, but they're all generally neighboring 5 to 6 million. And then our last one, West Side Elementary. You'll notice these are scattered all across the county, and that's by design, depending on where we see growth and where we think we may need to pull the trigger for any one of these. Again, this one, allowing for a classroom addition that would net an additional 352 student stations. Again, a significant quantity of portables on this site. The car line length would increase in this proposed design from 32 cars on site to 223. Of interest in this portion is the yellow dashed rectangle on the west side of the site on Roy Drive. That parcel has already been acquired, school district, making this concept that much more readily achievable. The cost on this one is significantly higher at $10 million because of associated renovations that are required for this older facility. Now, while we believe all of these concepts are viable, the challenge is figuring out how to fund each of these projects soon, or enrollment increases capacity of our schools. The reason that's a challenge is because the law restricts the funding sources that public schools can use to fund capital construction. Our Director of Budget and Finance will speak more to that this morning. But for now, let's focus on what we can do with the funds that we have. The purpose of impact fees, of course, is to construct infrastructure and facilities public schools needed to accommodate growth. Our impact fee fund balance is currently around $7 million. That means that really we can only afford to do one of these projects. And similar to building a new school, constructing a classroom addition at only one site in the county means that you would then need to redistrict, adjust the school boundaries, balance the enrollment at schools throughout the county. It's a necessary process, of course, but it's always upsetting students and families. So, Planning and Growth Management Committee put their heads together, try and find another way to make the best use of current funds on hand and leave school boundaries alone for the time being. Settled on an even less costly and smaller scale approach at every elementary school. Let's take a look at that. So here we have a multi-site capacity improvement project. This is just one concept that would be implemented throughout the district. The idea here is to identify spaces within the permanent classroom buildings that are not currently used as classrooms, but which could be. Then we would relocate the displaced function on an as-needed basis to new small precast concrete buildings, same size as portables, but permanent construction. They're inherently safer, more durable than portables. They can be erected very quickly, and they can be reallocated because they're permanent. They could be reallocated as classrooms in the future if need be. And the estimated cost for this project at Brooksville Elementary might be in the neighborhood of $900,000. So again, to reiterate, we increase permanent capacity looking at 3 candidate spaces which could be converted to classrooms, netting 62 additional student stations for our permanent capacity and adding 3 new concretables. And this concept, similar concept has been explored for Suncoast Elementary as well at an approximate estimated cost of $900,000. Again, in this one, converting about 8 candidate spaces to classrooms, resulting in 88 additional student stations. adding 3 new concretables. And at Westside Elementary, it had an estimated cost of $600,000, remodeling and reassigning 2 interior spaces for an additional 44 student stations, and providing new concretable. So these site improvement projects use the capital funds that we currently have on hand. The increased permanent capacity, again, this concept would be distributed at as many schools as possible. It would defer the need to shift school boundaries. It would defer proportionate share mitigation agreement with developers that are facing us now, and it affords us time to arrange funding needed to implement the larger projects proposed in our master plan.
I have Commissioner Narveru, that's one question.
Smart, but what I'm questioning is, would you still be handling the capacity for the additional students that are coming
in? The funding of this project, frankly, wouldn't allow for that. We would need to, the different portions of the different concepts presented in the master plans could be executed in various phases, depending on each campus. Might be able to be executed in various phases, but we would have to look at a cost per phase. At this point, this is a higher level of planning than what we've gone into, but that really is the next step, is figuring out what would be the cost to accommodate various solutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holcomb.
So I think the question I was going to ask is you actually, I think you answered it with your concretables, was if you didn't have to build these buildings that you're showing here as a hurricane, I guess, qualified building, would that save you money? But I think the concretables really asked that question. And then, so I think you showed 4 different plans here. Are all of those required to meet capacity? Is it 1? Is it 2?
They are not all required to meet capacity. Our goal in moving forward is to identify how much we could potentially develop each school, what capacity we could achieve, so that when the decision is made, we need capacity, we already have a solution that's that much closer to shovel ready.
So are we not there yet, as indication from your last response?
We're not quite there yet. We're very, very close. As I mentioned, there's at least one development that we're on the cusp of entering into a proportionate share mitigation agreement. So on these completable plans at the 3 schools that we mentioned, at Brooksville, at Suncoast, and at Westside, those we are actually proceeding with now to increase that capacity at a fairly minimal cost, and our goal is to have those completed before next school year starts.
Okay. Thank you.
So you made a comment, you said that you're looking to reallocate some of the space for non-classroom space and use classroom space, and then use the portables or the concretables for non-learning needs. I think that's fantastic. It's a good idea if you have the space to do that. If you want to maximize the learning space. Again, I like the concretables. It's actually back in 2000, because I lived near Spring Hill Elementary at the time, and that used to look like, no offense, it looks just like a trailer park out there. There were so many portables out there. And I was reading the trade magazine that had those concretables back in 2000. And I think even back then they talked that they could actually be stacked if you were using it for non-learning space as well, because the way they were designed, they could actually hold the weight of another one on top of there when you're in a situation where you had limited space. Later on in the discussion items, we had suggestion at school pickup lines, but since you've already hit on that with some of these plans, why don't you just roll that into the conversation right now? This is really important to us on the board, on the county commission, because we get regular complaints about this, and obviously it makes for situations at times where people are literally trapped in their homes because there's cars parked in the road in front of them. Any other ideas other than if maybe alternate surfaces so you can move ahead with some of these projects. I mean, we have lots of roads in Hernando County that are lime rock. I mean, if you can't do pavement right away, maybe get it started and build your base up and use the roads out of an alternate material. That might be an option. Maybe it's not. The other thing is, when you go to a restaurant, everybody doesn't stand in the lobby waiting for their spot. They get a time or they get a beeper, pager, whatever it is. You can use even text messaging now. Why not have pickup times assigned with times so you don't have parents waiting an hour before pickup to sit in the road or in your parking lot waiting for a pickup, and you're assigned a time. If you show up before, you go to the back of the end, go to the end of the line then, and you change habits. Again, it's just an idea. I don't know if it's possible, if that's something you've discussed, but there's got to be better ways than getting an hour ahead of pickup time and parking in a road. I think that there'd be better things to do with people's time as well. Our administrator has a question.
Just to understand, plan you have of using the existing buildings and making the concretables, the additional student stations that are on those plans, does all those added up? Like on your previous presentation, you had a graph that showed kind of capacity, and basically elementary schools, you were over capacity. Did those concretables that's in the initial plan here solve that immediate concern of your capacity issues in the elementary schools? Truthful answer is I don't know. On a school-by-school basis, it may not. The goal is when we implement this district-wide that we come that closer to having the permanent capacity we need. It still may not be enough as we're doing our currency reviews. I mean, it really is going to depend on the size of the development come through, but it helps us to manage that a little bit better and helps us to defer some of the larger construction. Is it fair for me to, the way I understand your presentation is this last plan with the concretables is a plan to solve the elementary school capacity issues in the county and what's basically at us right now, and then your first plan, which you said you don't not funding available for, to provide capacity for what you see as growth in the, because are you bigger plans with the roads and then the buildings then built? Is that plan for growth in the county as you see it in the future? Are you planning that those buildings solve for growth in the next few years? I mean, it's hard to understand what kind of growth we're going to have. We don't know until they knock on a door, right? But I know this initial plan solves like today's issue, but next year we'll be here again. And then the multi-site capacity projects, frankly, they do kick the can down the road. But again, it's a matter of working within our means with what we have.
Yeah, Administrator Scott, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the parking issue there. Schools, principals, Jim and his team and facilities have worked incredibly hard to try to get every car off of the road that we possibly can. Double stacking, increasing, and rerouting, and all those things. So we share that common goal. I drive by the same schools constituents do and the same schools you do, and I see the same lines. We really can't control somebody showing up an hour in advance. Trust me, as a former principal, I've tried to convince parents they don't need to be there even 2 hours before. Some they need to be. That becomes difficult. So I think it's worth noting, Mr. Lipsey presented plans to alleviate some of those issues at some of our densely populated area schools, but it's an incredibly exorbitant cost to do it. And I'll have to put in a plug that's something that impact fees certainly help out too. That's the fees we're using now to do the infrastructure build outs within. We share that goal, just can't afford, honestly, to rectify that anytime soon. And then my concerned superintendent is that what's the potential growth that we're going to experience on the east side of the county? None of these plans really address that. if there aren't schools that are close that have any type of capacity. I mean, our closest elementary schools on the east side are at capacity. So I'm very concerned down the road with the growth that's going to happen. We're, in my opinion, going to have to build a school or multiple levels of schools out there on the east side. And we're trying to be prudent in our approach now, and we're trying to also financially plan for that day. That none of us knows when that's going to happen, but it's out there. I'm sure we're all aware of the bill that's also out there with the 3% cap on impact fees. Just thought that was worth mentioning. I'm certainly not against the 3% cap. Whatever growth we can experience alongside everybody, we'd be happy with, but 3% is minimal if you look at the cost of what's needed in the near future. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
Sure. So one other thing, obviously we've had some space issues as well. And one of the places our eyes are always are looking at the changing retail model and open space. And I don't know if the school district has used that or looked into that as well to see that we have large retail establishments that suddenly or in the very near future will be empty spaces because of online. And is it possible to renovate sort of a retail building that's already in place with lots of parking to make it a safe environment for a school or for school functions that are not classroom functions? So I don't know if you've looked in that direction or not. But
certainly not against looking in that direction, and I know I think I spoke to your county administrator. I think he's looked in that direction as well. I think most people find out that the cost to renovate exceeds the cost to build. With that said, we're not against it, but as Mr. Holcomb pointed out, we definitely have to play by certain rules when we have buildings that we're putting our students in. They have to be meeting all of the requirements. I'm not sure if that would be cost beneficial. Not against looking at it. And again, I don't want to speak for the board on that. I've got ahead of them.
Sure.
But I believe they would be willing to look at any and all options that we could feasibly do and meet all of our requirements.
Sure. One of the benefits, cost. Is that there? Okay. One of the concerns, if it did cost more, was the fact that it's done a whole lot faster because you have a building that's there already. So you're talking about the east side of the county as an example. I mean, by the time you go through purchase, planning, development, I mean, you're talking a long time out. So if there's nothing planned there, obviously that's a problem. That's just waiting, to happen. And I'm not saying you're not looking at it. It's just that was an option as far as speed. It may not be I don't know why these microphones keep doing it, but it might not be as financially prudent. But if it's done this year instead of 6 years from now, that makes a big difference. Thank you. Is there anybody else who has any questions related to this item? Do you see them? Administrator.
I will comment on that retail space scale real quickly. I think the number one hurdle that we've got it many times in the county is ownership. So you have to own it. You can't go spend $10 of taxpayers' money on something that we don't own. And then so that's the number one hurdle. You can own one, then I think you have a project. You buy a shopping center, you have a project.
Thank you. We have school board member Jimmy Lodato. You're recognized.
John, now that you mentioned that, do you have a list of any of those areas that you possibly are looking at that we can get our eyes on and see if there's a possibility we can work there? I mean, that interests me. That's happening all over the country.
There are a lot of commercial pictures in the air.
Okay. All right, great. Because I think it's a really good idea. Because all over the country, we're having this problem right now. The big shopping centers are closing down and everything is going, projects. And if that's available, we need to look at it.
I'm not saying that they're necessarily available right now, but it certainly should be an option for all of us in government to be looking at utilizing building spaces, purchasing them if necessary, rather than having an empty warehouse sit there and become a blight on the community. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak to this item? Okay, we are going to move on then to career and tech plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lipsey.
I would like to now invite up Sophia Watson and Beth Lastra. Both are in charge of our career and technical education programs, which is near and dear to my heart, and I know it is everyone's in this room because it is a direct economic development impactor on our community as a whole. So I know they're excited to share with you what we do at each level and then some future plans that we've been discussing as a larger group.
I don't know what word to do. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk to each one of you about the programs that we have offered through Hernando County Schools, not only to educate, but to prepare our students for the workforce. My name is Beth Lastra. I'm the supervisor for college and career programs, and I'm joined by Sophia Watson, who is a supervisor for adult and technical education. So the last time we spoke, our workforce was a little different, right, pre-pandemic. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about what's changed, where we're going as far as the state, as far as the district, what's still relevant, what's changed, and you know, we always start by looking at the Florida scorecard. I still think this is a great snapshot of how the state is doing. So we figured this time we would make it live so you can see. It breaks it down. If you've never seen this before, it breaks it down by county. I always start at the state. Has the COVID information on there now, but then good stuff, right? So we'll stop here. There's a couple new statistics that they show. In addition to our unemployment rate, now they're also showing the job over year-to-year change. So it looks like a big number, 560,000 less jobs. The good news was a month ago it was 572,000 less jobs, so we're improving. Hernando County was at one point, looking at Val, a little around 4,000, and we have done really great coming back. I think we're just at 1,000 less jobs than this time last year, so that's good news. But that is a change that we have to take into consideration. And there's also a really great statistic that they started including on here. If I can find it. It might just be specifically for Hernando County. Oh, open jobs and unemployed persons. So that's another really great stat. So you can kind of get an idea of what's happening across the state in addition to Hernando County. And this is specifically for Hernando County. So you can see how we're doing. Okay?
All right. Yeah. Can you roll back up to open jobs in Hernando County? Currently, I think it's one more screen up.
There we go.
3,500. Let's see.
That's unemployed people.
That's unemployed. Okay. Oh,
so open jobs is underneath our unemployment rate. So right here, 1,000. Well, that's actually, sorry, it's not open.
That's not it either, so it doesn't look like that.
You might not capture that number for locally.
Thank you.
Of course, I'm not the expert in this area. I looked at Val because that's our expert in the county. And obviously, if you've ever worked with Dave Hamilton at Career Source, he will take you down to the spreadsheet that you will have regretted that you ever asked the question. So those are your experts, but we just like to start here so we can see what the trends are so that we know when we're developing programs, we have to take certain things into consideration and what's happening in our job market, that is our number one driving factor. So we always like to start our conversations looking at what the climate looks like. Okay. So if you all open up your packet, on the right-hand side, there is a map that we put together. A lot of different colors, a lot of different writing on there, but we wanted to provide you guys, we wanted to provide you a snapshot of the programs that we have and where they are. So if you look down, let's say high schools, middle schools, K-8, the certificate number that's on there is something that our students, they have the opportunity to take industry certifications before they graduate high school. And so that is broken down by school, how many certifications are available for our high school students, as well as middle school and the K-8s right now. The little picture of the computer is something called digital tools. That is something that we offer to our students to increase digital literacy while they're in elementary and middle school, which encompasses the K as well, obviously. So you'll see that on there, as well as on the back, you can see by school which programs we offer. So for instance, you know, our welding program, they are getting certifications before they graduate that they can go into the field and use. Auto has ASC certification that they graduate with. We have nursing assistant. We started EKG this year. And then we also have allied health where students are graduating and they're either having an EKG certification, they receive a CNA, or they receive their CMAA, so that when they graduate, they have that tangible item that they can go into the field with. So this you'll see that we have. We also try to create feeders so that students who are working on things in elementary then can move into the middle schools, then can move right into their high schools in similar programs, as well as then moving on to post-secondary education through Suntech, or one of our partners. One of my things, I guess, that I kind of work on, I call them E's. We look at our elementary schools to give students exposure to opportunities, to different career paths, to just different things so that they have, again, that experience. So the exposure, the engagement comes from middle school, so they're enrolling in programs, maybe robotics or digital information tools or commercial arts, digital design, you know, things like that. And then they have experience where they get into high school, and we offer OJT, we offer work experience, we offer a little bit of kind of everything, so students really get in there. Our energy program at Nature Coast has built a tiny house, super adorable, you know, those students have had that hands-on experience with roughing in the plumbing and doing things outside of just energy, but creating that whole model. So then hopefully those 3 E's then lead to employment, education, or enlistment. And that's, you know, I think we all would agree that we want our students, our, you know, community members moving into those areas from high schools. So post-secondary, our dual enrollment agreements, we have agreements with USF, UF, PHSC, and Suntech, so students have opportunities to move through those avenues and those pathways to go on to post-secondary as well. And we're keeping our eyes open and looking for other opportunities as well that students can engage and move on to, again, either education or a technical degree, or straight into the workforce, our local workforce.
And the next thing that we're going to look at, there's a height difference. We're going to keep moving the mic. The next thing we're going to look at is our career and technical programming plan, so you can kind of get an idea. This is a snapshot of what's happening. The second page has our current programs. So one of the things that's changed at the state is they're really into some rapid credentialing this year, and they're going to roll some of that out again next year. So even though we have longer programs like welding, like HVAC, they want to see programs that people can get in very quickly, get trained very quickly, and get part of the workforce immediately, and then come back, right, for their longer training. So Suntech offered 3 rapid credentialing programs this year. We're hoping that next year will be more, because we'll have a little more time to plan with that grant cycle, because it's all a grant cycle, right? So we launched Forklift, we launched Cloud Essentials, and we expanded our CNA program, because we know that that is still a major need here in the community. So Cloud Essentials is a good site, and if you want to go back, we've had one of our students who's already signed up to go again and learn about cybersecurity and get their A+ certification. But the Cloud Essentials is a much shorter program, also still a market. But it's a quick piece of bigger piece that we know it spans all the way through USF or regionally, right? So that's what we're trying to plan for next year. You'll see what we're currently offering at Suntech, and we'll talk next about where we're going.
Great. So on this side, you'll see programs of interest. What we have to do, or what we tend to do, is typically use the regional demand list that is put out by CareerSource Florida when we're looking at programs to offer here in the county. We do that because that is a list that the Department of Education, Florida Department of Education, recognizes when we are developing our programs. So they won't fund any other programs, so that makes it hard for our teachers to be able to obviously run programs. So we look at that list. These are the programs that we are looking at or considering for the future in secondary, crime scene investigation, firefighting, hospitality, tourism, and pharmacy tech. Again, we have conversations with people in the community, different areas. We met with Oak Hill, one of their big areas was pharmacy tech, so we decided to investigate that a little bit more. And then through post-secondary programs, you'll see the list is much more extensive because, again, with the rapid credentialing and things like that, they have really some great things going on. But barbering, building technology, CDL class, CDL class B, diesel systems technology, early childhood education, HVAC 2, law enforcement, medical lab assistant, phlebotomy, massage therapy, and pharmacy tech. Again, what we try to do is kind of look at programs where we can benefit both our K-12 and our post-secondary so that we can partner together and make the most sense.
We're a small community, so it doesn't make sense that when we're looking at building programs that we're not working together. Because when we look at that welding lab, it's benefiting right now 24 students locally are between post-secondary and secondary are enrolled in our welding. So that's why we are deliberate about doing that. It's obviously easy to work in your own little bubble, but we make sure that we're working together. And great things happen from that. We'll hopefully introduce that later on. So the last thing we want to talk about is partners. You want to talk a little bit about how our folks partner with us?
Right. So partners, what we do is we use business partners in a variety of ways. Through our advisory boards, we have what I call umbrella advisory boards, where we kind of meet on a general scale, and then each of our programs have advisory boards. So Auto may have multiple businesses come in and be their advisory board. Just last week, we had our ASE certification, and part of that, research, part of that was to have 6 local dealership and or auto companies or businesses come in and serve as that advisory board and meet with the national certification. So we want to make sure that we have that voice in. Partners also offer expertise in terms of equipment, curriculum, different things that we're looking at, and then we partner with them as well on a variety of ways in terms of speakers and bringing them into our classrooms to give, again, that actual experience, that hands-on, that talking with, what was your experience for our students, for that real business owners.
And that works out great for my students, obviously, as adults, right? So when our guest speakers come in from the industry, a lot of them are ending up with jobs very entry level before that they're actually finishing with their industry certification, which is great for our students because we can leave a job that doesn't relate to their industry and they can actually start getting their foot in the door. And so we're excited to have partners come in and talk to our students and then talk to them about next steps too.
Right. We also take into consideration the industry certifications that our local workforce is saying that we need, not just something that we're saying, hey, this would be great to have, actually finding out what is helpful in the field.
And Beth brings up a great point. When we look at that list that was on the previous page, that list is just a landing spot. There's a lot of steps that happen between hitting that list and reality, right? So then we definitely involve all of our partners about, is there a need? Is there actual employers? What would that look like? What does the curriculum look like? What does the materials that needs to look like before we launch? Just because it hits a list doesn't mean it's 100% guaranteed. It means it's 100% guaranteed to be part of the conversations, and we'll build employer partners to have those conversations with them. And then the last update we want to give you, we are in our appropriation process. We're very fortunate that it landed on the budget for our school that we have been trying to get a standalone educational center here for the last couple of years. So that appropriation is again in this year. So if you support that and feel you need to tell someone you support that, I won't mind. That will drive a lot of our program growth. And then most recently, we've had also conversations with the county and with HSC has decided they also would like to look at what they can provide in this community. So we have all sat around the table a couple times trying to get to a vision of what that can look like for us, how we can support our businesses, all of us being the best that we can be to support Hernando County. And those conversations are still happening. And I think that they're going well. They're going well. So you probably have a question. Do you have any questions for us?
City Council, I'm sorry, I just went blank. Blake. I couldn't get the first name.
Thank you, Jeff. Quick question on the elementary schools. How do you become designated as a digital literacy school for the elementary school? Because I only see 2 on here. It'd be great if we get more.
Sure. So we are actually working on that. A lot of our schools are only able to do it through like they call it MTSS time, right? So kids that need additional remediation, and then there's kids that don't, and so they're little tiny like pockets, maybe 25 kids here, maybe 40. We're trying to expand it more and do it as like a specials. We've been working with a lot of principals. The plan was to do it last year for this year, but our year kind of got messed up a little bit. So we're working this year with, I believe I have 5 or 6 other principals who want to have that as part of their curriculum for next year in some shape. Because the hardest thing is really finding something that we can connect with a curriculum that we don't want to add something else for them to be doing. But we are working with principals to expand that, and we expect to see that in the majority of our elementary schools very soon in some shape or form. Yeah.
Do we have anyone else? Commissioner Holcomb.
Thank you. As I've prepared for a new position, I've been talking to some leaders up in Tallahassee, and their information may be a little more national and more statewide. I don't think it's a problem, which is why I don't think we had that job openings figure up there. I don't think it's a Hernando County problem, but I'm hearing that there's massive job openings, especially at entry level, restaurant, retail, those type of places. And in fact, I did actually go to a restaurant Friday night, and they said they hired 2 people and they've never showed up. And add that to the fact of the minimum wage, which has been increased. So it's great that you're talking to partners. I would just recommend that you talk to them about that near-term future with that minimum wage and how that's going to be affecting them from a job standpoint and preparing them for those jobs and everything. So look forward to that. But again, I don't think that necessarily has a problem in Hernando County. But thank you.
We have anyone else? Okay. School board member, Kay Hatch, thank you.
Only a comment, because I recognize that this meeting is going to be broadcast more widely than this room. And thank you for bringing to all of our attention that our focus is not only on working with our students, getting them to graduate, and then getting them into college exclusively, so that we have broad-based programs that provide for needs of all of our students that are beyond educating all of them to go to college. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Absolutely. We want our students to do whatever they want to do when they grow up. So our job is to prepare them to do any of that.
And I recognize that, but sometimes there's a perception that all that we're doing is preparing our students and therefore our graduates to be college bound. And our commitment is much broader than that. So thanks for bringing everybody to this.
So I have questions for you myself. Looking at your proposed new programs, see diesel system technology. What I don't see on there is electrical motor technology or battery technologies. I would hope that that's at least in the back of your mind when you see even the domestic automotive companies are completely revamping. I mean, Cadillac, I guess, is going to go fully electrical. Ford and I'm sure Daimler, Chrysler, whatever they're, Fiat now, I'm sure they'll be going that direction as well. And then obviously the technology behind the batteries, because they don't last forever, and they're going to, I'm sure, need to be prepared because they can't just get dumped into our landfill. So hopefully you're looking at that.
Yeah, and if I can respond to that, this is a great opportunity to talk about what happens when PHSB and us get in the room together and we can talk about what our entire community needs. So we know we're the foundation piece, right? Automotive service tech, diesel service tech. We know that we have to bring some more apprenticeship opportunities, both at the state college and at the school district. So what does it look like for a pre-apprenticeship in automotive? What does an apprenticeship in automotive look like? And PHSC is going to be driving that electrical piece, right? Because it's a more specialized AS degree, and that's what it should look like everywhere, right? And that's the great part about us getting in a room together and talking about the entire community, because now we've created an entire continuum. Because not everyone's going to go to college, and not everyone's going to go to college right away. And we want them, when they decide to come back to college, that they have options here. And that is what it should look like. We're already working towards this direction, all of us.
Excellent. Before I go to you, Mr. Stratton, I just wanted to understand this. I see all these other these program opportunities at each of the schools, but obviously they're not all the same. And so when you're dealing with districting and things like that. How does this work out if somebody has an interest, say, in one of the pathways that are not at the school that they're districted for?
So that's part of the bigger plan, the bigger picture that we'd like to do, and I briefly spoke about it at one of the county commission meetings recently, is that we want to develop robust programs, different programs, in our different high schools in particular, and trickle down into middle school. And then the student chooses which program they want to be into, so they would go on school choice. So if I wanted to be in the welding program at Central, but I'm zoned for Springstead, I could choose, as long as capacity and everything's met, I could choose to go over there. The mindset behind that is obviously the more we can get a high school student, or any student for that matter, to buy in and want to be there, the more successful they're going to be in the end. So that's the bigger picture, and they can do that now. They don't have to wait to ask to attend a program at a different school. But we want to make them even more robust, start to create some magnet-type concepts in each of our high schools. So hopefully I answered that. And then I just also wanted to put in another plug that while it's always important, we need to hear from the community and our parents. It is critical in this particular area that we hear from the business sector, from the county, from economic development. It is critical because these programs you see on here now, 10 years from now, some of them will change. They're not going to be there. So we need to stay ahead of that curve. We have reports we look at for the state trends, but we also want to know what are the needs here locally in Hernando County, and we want to meet those needs. So as we move forward, we know we're building programs that have to be somewhat interchangeable in the future. And I'm really, really excited about the concept of the county coming together, Sheriff Department, some local businessmen here and women here, and the college, and we're building that success center. And I know you guys are aware of that. It's just an amazing concept that I think is going to be a driver of economic development for the entire county. And I'm very proud, we mentioned for the third year in a row, we have appropriation in the Senate budget, it's $9.3 million to build a standalone technical school, which at this time we're talking about a shared venture, and that would be built on county-owned property out at the airport. Makes all the sense in the world to me that we build our economic hub around the airport. So we're really excited. It's to the governor's desk 2 years in a row. Unfortunately, COVID hit, I think one year a hurricane or something, the other. Anyway, we were part of $1 billion line item that got deleted, so I didn't take offense to that. But this year it's back on, I'm hoping it's back on his desk, and any support as a community as a whole, that is just one piece of the puzzle, this technical center at the adult level, one piece of the bigger, larger puzzle. So really excited about where we as K-12 and the adult system, but we as a county as a whole are heading with this concept and idea.
Ms. Prescott, you're recognized. We'll go to Ms. Lodato.
Speaking of preparing for the future, I know the Sierra Club has been studying where charging stations are. Have you had any discussions or plans? I know the state of Georgia worked with Walmart, and they have charging stations in all the Walmarts. Currently, I know of only one, and that was at the credit union that the Suncoast just built, but I'm not sure if you've had that discussion at all.
I don't believe you'll see this board subsidizing people's fueling of their vehicles on county dime. So if a private company wants to put one out to draw business to their store, like a credit union or something like that, you might see that. I'll go to Commissioner Narver.
What about your employees, Commissioner Watson?
They're welcome to charge home rental as well, but they're to do that.
I think that would be a good business incentive.
I can kind of speak to this because I'm in that industry as well. You can go online and you can look at where all the charging stations are throughout the nation and also throughout Florida. The big change and the big shift in most of the electric cars that are coming out is how far they can go. It used to be 30 miles. It used to be estimated all the hybrids. Now you're getting the ones where what they have is they have a dynamic shifting thing where while you're braking, you're actually recharging your battery
driving. So it's really kind of cool that you can use your paddles for something, not just there for decoration, to help continually charge that car. And the majority of the places, there are enough charging stations around, but most of the charging is done at home. You know, the charger comes with it. They actually have a coordination with companies to come in if you wanted to put in a 220 volt instead of, or 240, I don't know, whatever, the bigger one, to make it go faster. But the thing is when they go to work, they typically are close to home. You know, most people don't drive full capacity of their car in a day. So it really isn't an issue.
What about our tourists, though, that we're trying to attract?
There are plenty of stations out there, and you would think that hotels would be putting that kind of stuff in because that would attract the customer with an electric car. So I really think that it's going to be handled mostly by the private sector. Okay.
Battery, is that what you said? Okay. One of the things that we also want to keep in mind is that the power that are going into those charging stations doesn't just magically get there. In Florida, we're still using fossil fuels to create that electricity. So that's something we want to keep in mind as well. We have had conversations however, as a board, many of us are on the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We've had discussions about the concerns of our road, because your gas taxes are not being paid by those vehicles that drive on our roads, and so they get the benefit of subsidized roads that they drive on all the time, and also the opportunity for sometimes tax breaks on income as well.